Peec AI is in the forefront of all the research that is coming out with regards to LLM visibility. It's an amazing tool. But first of all, Malte, thank you for coming on the show today. What are you focusing on right now?
Thanks for having me. What I'm focusing on right now, honestly, making sense of all the data that we are finding in ChatGPT and the other LLMs. Like, if we talk about the current week, I think in the news cycle there were a lot of things where suddenly you could see chats from people who clicked the share button, and then for DeepSeek was in the news cycle, and like Claude, and we also found something similar on Quen, where if you do a deep research, you can actually publish that to the community. And I think also there, many people don't realize that you can basically browse the deep researches that they have done. It's not really like AI relevant in itself, right? It's more like people using these tools, not understanding this with Google site search. And even when there's a robots.txt block, you can still find their URLs with their private chats. But of course, it's interesting because you see what people are really prompting and what they are typing into the systems. So that's what I'm currently playing with. And then I'm looking a lot into the maps feature of ChatGPT at the moment, trying to understand the different data sources. Like, unfortunately, the press release recently came out that Yelp is now an official partner.
Yeah.
We had already seen that in the data before because there were two different Yelp sources and one of them looked like an official API. And as with many other things, also in the maps feature, we find a lot of hints that there might be some Google scraping happening. So these are the things that my team is looking at right now.
One of our main questions that our listeners love hearing about. What are the top 3 ranking factors if you want to rank across LLMs?
There are 2 areas where you can have influence, right? It's your own website and it's stuff that's happening outside of your own website. I would say for your own website, the most important thing is you need to have the right content. So if you want to be found for commercial topics, you need category pages or collection pages and product pages that are well optimized. If you want to be found for more informational queries, you need articles, maybe how-to guides, maybe listicles. And if you want the LLMs to correctly understand your pricing and the features of your product, you need product pages for yourself, a pricing page, etc., etc. And then when it comes to like really having your brand recommended, I would say consensus is the most important things. Whatever you claim about yourself on your own website, the same thing must be said on external third-party websites. It must be very, very easy for the LLMs to verify your claims. So if you say that you are an enterprise solution, there should be content on other websites that says that you have single sign-on, support large account, multi-country setups, etc., etc. So having this consensus on your own websites and third-party sources, that is, I would say, the most important factor. And that it depends on the topic, what that is. If you are a B2B SaaS company, whatever is written on Reddit, YouTube, G2, Tech Radar is going to be super relevant. If you are a cosmetic brands targeting Gen Alpha, and I guess nobody is targeting Gen Beta yet, then you need TikTok and Instagram and maybe YouTube as the channels where the LLMs pull information from. So you need to influence what is written there about your brand.
Yeah. Talking about consensus, everyone has been using, abusing, manipulating listicles. As of July 2026, are they still as effective and powerful as they were 6 months before? Jan 2026.
I think overall, listicles still have the same power and the same influence. We still see a lot of listicles in the sources, especially when you have a prompt like best dudedum solution, best product for something, you will always see listicles. What has stopped working as good are these listicles that you publish on your own website, where you put yourself on number 1. Some people call these self-preferential listicles. These seem to have stopped working as well as they used to work. And I mean, to be honest, many people have been saying it for months, like, this is too easy, it's too obvious, this cannot continue to work that well. And now it seems that especially Google, as the grounding layer for many LLMs, has finally pulled the plug and has made it much, much, much more difficult. I'm still seeing people who get brand recommendations primarily based on their own listicles, but it has definitely become more difficult. If we talk about third-party listicles, those still seem to work very, very well. If you can get a high authority, high reputation website, either by talking to them nicely or by giving them money to write a listicle where they say you are the best, that still works very, very well to influence LLMs.
There have been many case studies and analysis that say the sooner you answer the query, that's what gets pulled by LLMs. Is that true?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm not sure I got it.
So there have been a lot of case studies and analysis where experts have said that the sooner you answer the query in your article as soon as possible, that's what gets extracted in the LLM answer. Is that true?
As far as I know, yes. Statistically speaking, if you look at correlation, it's true. The problem is correlation does not always imply causation, right? So what we are seeing is the answer comes more often, or the cited passage that the LLMs actually cite, that comes more often from the top of the article. However, in a good long article, you probably put a summary on top, or like you have the main takeaway in your introduction. So this could just be connected to how articles are often structured. When we look at, for example, deep research agents on ChatGPT, there we know for a fact that they only check the first, I think it was 1,500 characters. I would have to check. It would be 1,500 tokens. So there, definitely whatever is written on top is used first, and they only continue reading if the first part gives them something interesting. So on the areas of the system where we can fully reverse engineer it, yes, it's true. Whatever is written on top is more important than what's written on the bottom. In the observation that we see, it's also true, but I don't know anybody who has really run a proper A/B test, like taking the summary from the top, putting it on the bottom. Will it lead to fewer citations? So I would say, based on everything I know, it is true, but I cannot actually scientifically prove it for every single URL and every single model.
When it comes to listicles, is it important to be number one in the rating, or even if you are, placed on number 2 position, but you are being highlighted as this brand is overall the best brand, what's more important?
That's a good question. I've never seen that case where the brand that is best overall wasn't also on position 1. Usually in a listicle, you want to be position 1. That is the short and simple answer.
Okay. And have you seen any kind of similarity across various LLM results? And by that, I mean, if a brand is being cited, let's say number 1 in Gemini, it will have a higher chance of being cited at least in the top 2 in ChatGPT or Grok or Claude. Is there any correlation on that front?
I mean, of course, there's some correlation, because if you ask about CRM systems, you will probably find HubSpot in the answers and also in the sources, or you will see something like Reddit. But beyond that, there's actually gigantic difference between the LLMs. So OpenAI really likes to cite editorial websites. You will sometimes have 5 out of the top 10 websites are editorial websites. And when it comes to social media, it's usually limited to Reddit as like a top 3 source, and YouTube maybe a top 10 source. Then if you look for the very same prompts at AI overviews or AI mode, you will often see Facebook and Instagram in the top 5, top 10 sources. Of course, YouTube also a lot. If you look at Perplexity, there are these cycles. Like sometimes you have on average 2 YouTube URLs per answer, and sometimes that value drops to 10%. And Reddit is the same. Like there are phases where Perplexity absolutely loves Reddit, sometimes has 5 Reddit threads as sources in one answer, and then sometimes it drops to a very small percentage. So there is really, really massive difference in terms of sources between the LLMs. And the biggest thing I'm seeing is AI mode, AI overviews. They love social media. ChatGPT really, really loves editorial websites. Perplexity has a bias for governmental, university, and NGO websites. I guess because they try to find like the authoritative, as little manipulated as possible, as little marketing written as possible websites. And of course, in Grok, you have X as a source that is about as big as all other sources combined. So yeah, huge differences actually in the sources. And this also leads to different brands being mentioned in the answers.
Yeah. I love following a few of your other researchers. They come up with a lot of backend tracing data, how LLMs, how ChatGPT, how various LLMs are processing data. So when you are reverse engineering and you found out, let's say that you first found out about fan out queries, have you played around with any of that data produce content and found out, oh wow, this actually helps us to rank better or influence the data?
Of course, what we find out, we also try to apply, but we usually go the route of publishing our findings first. We don't gatekeep it to like secretly apply it on our own, unless maybe for 2 or 3 things. But usually when we find something, we just publish it, share it with everyone, and then we also see, hey, can we apply this? But since we are a pretty public brand that is a lot in the spotlight of our small industry, at least, we don't try to do anything sketchy. We don't want to win because of some cheap tricks. So there are some optimizations that we published a theoretical framework, like how it could work. Like we did this with deleted Wikipedia articles, for example, but we would not actually use this on ourselves, on our own brand, because we don't want to damage the brand and the brand perception.
Yeah. When it comes to ChatGPT's processing backend data and various things that ChatGPT does for processing its final answer. So there's definitely, it starts with fan out query. There's also search verbatim reasoning. Then there is obviously the sources that come. If someone has to plan their content, okay, I need to reverse engineer the backend processing. I have extracted fan out queries. I've extracted the reasoning data. And now I've extracted the whole list of sources. Now, when I have to start working on my consensus or my content, whether from on third-party sites or my own sites, which of these 3 data sets should one study or focus more on? Or let's say, what will be more helpful to get better results?
I think the one that immediately gives you better results are the fan-out queries. If you just create the best content on the internet for these fan-out queries, or if they are very long fan-out queries, then look at repeating topics within the fan-out queries. If you just create the best content for that, you're already doing very, very good. You're probably already immediately in the top 10% of SEO, content, GEO, digital PR teams that working on digital visibility, AI search visibility, if you can really create the best content for these fan-out queries. If you know what the sources are, of course, it makes sense to look at what kind of content formats are working for them and try to emulate that. And also to look at third-party sources where you are not mentioned to get yourself mentioned there. So if you see that G2 is often a source, you need to get a G2 profile. Like there's no alternative to that. And then you need to make sure to get a lot of positive reviews. And the last data I would look at is the reasoning data. I think it can give you amazing insights, but it's much harder to use. And basically, you need to take that reasoning data, dump it into an LLM, and then run some very smart prompts on it to really get something out of there. And it's very important, the LLMs do not give us the real reasoning data, right? Like even what we see as reasoning is usually a summary of the reasoning that is happening, but still it can give you huge insights. So for example, if in the reasoning it says 3 of these listicles are obviously written by the brands that publish them, I don't trust them. That is a big insight. But then if it said, this one listicle that was published on Medium, it's written by an employee of one of these companies, but he said he based everything on independent third-party reviews, so I trust this listicle. That should tell you something about what you should write in the introduction of your listicle. So it's super valuable data, but I think it requires the most advanced knowledge. And it also can happen that you analyze reasoning data for thousands of chats, and then you are like, this is pretty like meh. Like everything you get out of it is stuff that you already expected. So I would look at the reasoning data last. But if you have your basics covered, if you do them well, then it's a really great additional data source to bring everything to the next level.
The fan out queries that come out, they are not like a proper sentence structure. It sometimes looks like multiple keywords, 10, 15 keywords joined together. So if I have to write an article around it, I can't. It won't make sense. I've taken pieces of those keywords, made an article title that makes sense, has a good flow, and it starts to rank. Are the LLMs smart enough to identify those kind of articles?
Usually, in my experience, yes. If you look at ChatGPT fan-out queries about a year ago, they were actually still much shorter, and you could actually write an article with that as a title, almost like some declination, some stemming maybe, but usually you could use it as an article title. If you look at it now, as you said, it's like 16 keywords meshed together. It doesn't look anymore like a human search. It looks more like how you would search for retrieval in a vector database. So what you can do is, if you see for like 10, 20 chats, the same aspects are repeating in these fanout queries, that is what you write your article about. And all the terms from the fanout query, you sprinkle them in the article so that they are in there. And you sprinkle them in a way that makes sense. You don't dump them randomly, like just plugging some keywords here, but usually a keyword stands for something. Yeah, I don't know. If you have a prompt about loans and there is the term rate in there, it usually means, the interest rate. So I should probably write something about the interest rate of loans. That could actually be a subheadline with some information, depending on your content format. And then this should rank in search engines. And then if LLMs see it as a candidate document, they are very likely to use it as a source if it is well structured, well written. It is not needed to take like a 16 keyword fanout query and mash that somewhere in your content. That is not how either search engines or LLMs operate. Always turn it into a document that makes sense. Don't try to perfectly match the keywords. That is not needed.
The sources that get cited in ChatGPT, a lot of them come with a snippet. Have you found any data on that with regards to correlation, how this can be reverse engineered, how this can be implemented or utilized in future content strategy?
Not entirely. And in the past, actually, AI overviews would always in their source link include this quick link that the Chrome browser jumps to the right page, the right part of the page. So for AI overviews until a few months ago, actually for every single source, you knew exactly what part of the website they were referring to. And we have been playing with that data a bit, but in the end, it's the same conclusion as with LLMs overall. The part that the LLMs cite is ideally a chunk of text or paragraph of text that is written in a declarative, absolutistic voice, like you're stating a fact, you're not guessing. It usually mentions the entities specifically, so you don't have a sentence like, and for these reasons, the second solution is the best for the aforementioned buyer. If you take that sentence out of context, it makes actually zero sense. So it's better to have sentences like, based on Reddit comments and G2 ratings, Attio is the best CRM system for buyers who care about usability and UX. This is like perfectly citable, quotable sentence. It mentions the concrete entity. It mentions the sources. So based on something that is similar to Google's EAT requirements, it would actually pass that in a human review, right? Because the sources are transparent. So this is usually the best. It's also helpful, apparently, to have numbers in there and have it as simple as possible. So stating some clear facts. And usually a fact is a relationship between entities. Usually you have like one entity and then an attribute of the entity and a value for it, or two entities and a relationship between them. So you should have at least one short paragraph on your document, the one that you want to be cited, where you write in this style. It is very annoying if the whole article is written like this, because then, like, if every sentence is declarative, it just reads very, very weirdly. It doesn't really flow if you read it. It's not for humans, but it does work the best for LLMs for the citation.
Since you have been doing so much research, have you come across any black hat tactics that you think you've seen people are doing to manipulate besides listicles? We are talking like real black hat, lesser known strategies, manipulations that people are trying out to poison or manipulate the answer.
Yeah, so apart from the things that we already mentioned with Reddit, I've seen one case recently that is super successful also. It's a software company that offers a software for many different local businesses. And then what they have done is they've created 20 review websites. So they have a website. I mean, I don't want to reveal who's doing it, so I need to phrase it a little bit carefully. Dentist dududum software reviews. Haircut salon dududum software reviews. And it's always a whole website. It's always the same layout. It's very long, very detailed written. And there's always the same software solution number one. For the dentist, for the handyman, for the law office, it's always the same solution. And these are always one of the top sources. So if you look for this solution for a dentist, their dentist review solution website is the top source. If you look for the hairdresser software reviews, their website is one of the top sources. Usually that website is a top 3 source. And it always recommends the same brand. And I believe this is where almost all of their brand visibility is coming from, because like it's a software. But they are not listed as a top solution on G2, not at all. They are not even on the first page of solutions in G2. That's how small they are. The other brands are sometimes mentioned on the pages of the competitors. This solution is never mentioned on the competitor pages. Like, I really think if we go outside of LLMs, this is not a top 10 solution. This is a very small player, but they have such an aggressive AI search play that for their prompts, they are like in the top 3. And with their own source, they can really dominate the answer. I think that is the most successful black hat manipulation play I have seen with exact match keyword domains. I've seen something else a while ago that I could not really reverse engineer, but it seems that when you have a domain that looks like a typo of a very, very like familiar high authority like scientific or university domain, probably because of how tokens are treated, you can have gigantic advantages in being cited. So there I saw something a while ago where somebody had a domain and it was just a typo, like 2 letters were typed from a very big scientific magazine, and it didn't matter what they wrote about. They were always cited. Like for a couple of weeks, they were like super, super often cited in ChatGPT. It went then down again. But there seems to be also a play with having a website that looks like it is a very official website. And the way how LLMs handle text, how they fix typos, how they use tokens instead of words, there also seems to be something there for Black Hat. But I didn't dive deeper into that.
The first one that you shared is brilliant. We've seen a lot of brand new EMDs were outranking some of our competitors for some really solid big terms. Then we started seeing partial EMDs, and then I just saw a couple of ICP slash EMD too that were outranking for that specific prompt or niche. But the example that you shared is just brilliant. Just creating multiple EMDs based on the ICP or based on the sub niches and that outranking. That's such a interesting strategy. Have you seen any correlation when it comes to being cited in Google AI mode versus Gemini? Is there any overlap or any correlation between those two? Because both are under Google. And let's include Google AI overviews as well. Between the three, is there any correlation, any similarities or common factors that people can do to get better across the three?
So you would think that there's a high overlap, but surprisingly, there's actually not. I mean, of course, there is some correlation, but there's also correlation between Gemini and Perplexity and Gemini and ChatGPT. So AI overviews and AI mode, they are at least somewhat similar in the sense that both of them really favor social media. Both of them really like to cite Yelp for local queries. But apart from that, I cannot give you a clear thing that I saw that always works for both, but doesn't work for all the other LLMs. And then Gemini often has completely different sources. You would think, hey, at least Gemini and AI mode, they are so similar, but really they are not. They have completely different sources regularly. I often see that a website that is a top 10 source on Gemini is not a top 50 source even on AI mode, and also vice versa. I cannot tell you a general, this is what Google likes to cite, because it's so different. And you would expect that it's not so different.
Grounding versus live retrieval data. Where would you put more effort? Both are important, but if you had to just pick one and put all your efforts in one place, where would you put?
For most businesses, influencing the grounding is the thing that they should do. Like publish content or influence content on other websites that can make it into the grounding sources. That is where I would put my effort.
Let's talk about your tool, Peek. What are your top 3 favorite features from your own tool?
So I think the source and source gap analysis, where I can immediately see sources that are regularly cited, where multiple of my competitors are mentioned and where I am not mentioned. It's a feature that we've had for a very long time by now, but I still think it's one of the most valuable features out there because it immediately gives you a to-do list, and it's much more actionable than just a list of sources or just a list of sources where you are missing, because the moment that 6 of your competitors are mentioned there, there's a very high likelihood that you also have a chance to be mentioned there. So I think that is my favorite feature. Then I really like what we have built around shopping, where we extract products and their attributes and the products they are competing with in the product box. And there I think we give e-commerce websites a lot of interesting insights. And then something I'm very excited about right now is what we are doing around ads. So we have seen the ads in the chat since they existed, and now we are starting to make this data more accessible to customers. So seeing a list of all the ads that are running for the prompts that you care about, having like an ad library where you can see what kind of ad tags are your competitors using, and then also like trying to understand which brands are bidding on the prompts where my name is mentioned, etc., etc. I think those would be my top 3 features right now, but I think it also changes depending on what I'm currently looking at and what features are new.
Regarding ChatGPT itself, it has so many models. Now there's 5.6. If you're on the paid Pro Max plan, you have low, medium, high, extra high. And every model within ChatGPT itself spits out different styles of fan out queries, different reasoning. Is it important to scrape every single model's backend data, or does the latest one 5.6 maximum effort? If I extract all the data from that model, all the fan out queries, all the reasoning data, all the sources, will that be enough to cover and target the older models, the smaller models?
It always depends. With 5.6, it is very aggressive in doing fan out queries. Like it's doing a lot of them. So very likely, yes, you would capture everything that 5.5 or 5.4 mini, etc., is also doing. But there might also be a time when a new model comes that is doing fewer fan out queries by default. And we also have to think about probably the average ChatGPT user for the average question is not using 5.6 with high reasoning. What we have seen generally is that a non-logged in user, which is what we are scraping, is not seeing the newest model the moment it's released, but like with a bit of a delay. So for example, when GPT-4 came out, there was a time when as a non-logged in user, you would still see GPT-3, and then a few months later, you would also see GPT-4. The same thing happened with GPT-5. So usually I would not recommend people to track all of these models. Like it's also expensive. But if you, for example, to plan your content campaign, want to just within 1 or 2 days gather as much fan out query data as possible, yes, you could try to track all of these models. Right now, there is an advantage in tracking 5.6 because it has a new style of fan out queries where it's doing a site search and also adding a lot of keywords to it. So you could see what kind of content is ChatGPT looking for on your own website. Like if ChatGPT is doing a site search for your website and says, let's say, pricing agencies, then very obviously it's looking for the pricing for agencies. And then you should have a website for that. And you should make sure you have content for that. And since it's a site search, multiple of your documents can rank. So you should also make sure my top ranked document for this site search, do they all agree with each other? Is there consensus between them? Or is one of them maybe outdated? Like, is my pricing page up to date? But then in my help center, I still talk about the old pricing. So right now is a time where it absolutely makes sense to look at fan out queries from GPT 5.6. But in your daily monitoring, it can get super, super expensive to just every day track all of your prompts with 5.6. I think that would be overkill. That is not something I would recommend to everyone. But as a temporary data collection, right now is a time where, yes, using 5.6 via the API can give you a lot of additional data that via front end or UI scraping is not available yet.
So if you, let's say, work on data that we extract through 5.6 high model, eventually after maybe 6 months or maybe after a year, this will become the base for the next model that comes through, right? The next model that will come will be even higher, and people who are on lower tiers will be using 5.6. So if we start preparing our content using 5.6, will it make sense to help our content rank better for the long run?
I think that's actually true for any model. Like even if you look at 5.6 medium, even 5.5, I don't know what the fast model is called for 5.5, but like for Gemini, it would be 3.5 Flash, for example. Even with these models, if you can create content where you are the best in these, that will already prepare you for whatever model is coming next. I wouldn't say that every model is always like the previous model and then just a little bit better, because sometimes they also do different things, like fan-out queries changed a lot, for example, over time. There was a time when ChatGPT was doing a ton of Reddit site searches, and that went down significantly. So if somebody had seen, the newest model is doing Reddit site searches, so that's not the only thing I focus on, they would have done the right thing for a couple of weeks, but it would not have prepared them for GPT 5.6, for example. So I think in general, it's a good assumption that I optimize for the latest models, and that is the best I can do right now for the future models. But I should also think about, if this model got better, what else should it do? What else could it do? Because at the end of the day, the mission of the models is quite clear. Answer the question of the user, do not have any false information, and try not to be manipulated by marketing. And if you just have this in the back of your head and form a mental model around it, I think you can also think about, okay, what are the things that are easier that will work in the future. So for example, if an article said that it's an advertorial, of course, the smarter the models get, the better they will be at understanding, okay, maybe I don't value advertorials that high. But if you can get a journalist to organically recommend you because they tested your product and they are a fan, or because you paid them some money under the table and asked them to do it without disclosing it, this will be effective longer than an advertorial, right? It just makes absolute sense. And if you can get 3 newspapers at the same time to write something about you positively, that is obviously better than just one of them, because if an LLM looks for consensus, it will see the consensus. So I think also, like, just thinking about, if you were a product manager at OpenAI or at Google and you are tasked with try to keep cost low, do not give wrong advice, do not be manipulated by marketers, what would you do? And with more CPUs, more grounding, more resources. And then I think often you can come to the things like, maybe I would look at social media websites where verified humans are communicating, or maybe I would look at Google Maps and G2 where I have aggregated user reviews, or maybe I would look at Wikipedia where the community is always editing and making sure that there are no wrong statements and that there's no marketing. So I think this combination of use your brain and look at what is currently working in the latest models is a good preparation for the future.
Right. And have you seen any effect of schema or llms.txt when it comes to LLM rankings?
So llms.txt for ranking, almost zero impact. It's just a regular text file that is on the internet. I could publish a malte.txt, and if I link it from my homepage and put very relevant content in there, of course it can rank in Google, it can rank in Bing, it can become a source in an LLM. But this is not about the name of the TXT file. For agents, llms.txt is relevant. I explain where can you find my API, how to get an API key, here's my API documentation, here's my MCP server. For that, it's helpful. But with ranking, it doesn't help. And then the other thing you mentioned was
Schema.
Yeah, schema, this is a bit of a two-sided thing. So if you look at how LLMs work, it seems that the schema is stripped from the HTML before it's given to the LLM. And also, if you ask LLMs to pick information from a certain URL and there's a mismatch between the content and the schema, or something is only in the schema, most of the times the LLMs miss the schema. Some LLMs in 100% of cases. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest the schema doesn't really work. On the other hand, there are a lot of case studies where people added schema and it increased their visibility. And there, I think there are 2 cases or 3 cases we need to differentiate. One is, if adding the schema means also adding content, then of course it works. Yeah, if I didn't have my opening hours, and now I add a schema with opening hours, there's now more content, so that works. And the second thing is, schema can give me a rich snippet in Google, especially in e-commerce. When the LLM grounding is happening, it has the title, the URL, and the SERP snippet. And the SERP snippet has some rich elements based on schema. So it can help that the LLM picks my website as a source. So in these 2 cases, I think it's very beneficial. But if we actually want the LLM to pick the information from the schema, most of the time that will not happen. So I would say overall schema is good because it helps you in the grounding process and it forces you to have this information, right? Let's say you have a business directory of companies and you have a schema with the address. It forces you to specifically have the address on every single listing. If you don't have that schema, you might miss the address on 10% of your listings. And of course, then that is bad for SEO, and that is also bad for AI search visibility. That's how I see the schema impact.
I've come across a couple of forums that have created their own MCP server, so you can integrate it into Claude or GPT and just communicate through ChatGPT or Claude itself. Basically, brands, SaaS, forums, websites are preparing for agentic use more. So even if you're not winning the recommendation or consensus race, if you start preparing your website for the agentic race, can it give you an edge? Can it give you an external or additional ranking boost?
In AI search, I'm not seeing that at all at the moment. There are still businesses where I would advise them to do it because the agentic web will very likely come and they can already have an advantage. And in many cases, already here, right? There are so many people who build their own little tools in Claude, and at some point they can't open a URL. So they ask Claude what to do, and Claude says, get a Firecrawl API key. And then either manually or with Claude Cowork, they get a Firecrawl API key. So for companies like Firecrawl, Vercel, Claude, GitHub, it is already right now important to be part of the agentic web, right? Because there are people out there building their own tools with Claude, with Codex, and you want to be there as a solution. Also having an MCP server for so many tools, it's so nice to offer that to your customers. Like I use Peec AI via the Peec AI MCP server in Claude, I would say half the time, because I can do so many analysis, also do stuff across projects that just would take more time if I did it manually in the browser. I still advise people to look at the agentic web and see which parts they can already open themselves up to, but I would not expect an immediately magical boost in your AI search traffic. That is super unlikely to happen.
This conversation can go for another 2-3 hours. Malte, thank you so much for sharing your insights. This is so valuable. One last question though. I have never seen any company with so many geo researchers. You guys are putting in a lot of effort into geo research. What's the whole goal with that?
We believe that there's a lot of misinformation in this space. I mean, you just have to open LinkedIn, scroll a little bit, and you will see somebody giving advice who has never worked in the field until a few months ago. We just think it's important to spread information to make people aware what actually works, what not, because there's all sort of snake oil going around, like people advising things that might actually make you lose your Google rankings. We have the hypothesis that in order for this whole industry to grow and to become mature and be taken serious, it is needed that we have fact-based case studies, reporting, research papers out there, and we want to do that, and we are willing to invest the time and money and effort and focus to do that, and we hope that the community will reward that. So it's a bet, but it's also a bet I'm very, very happy to make. And in the worst case, we only create knowledge that brings the whole industry forward. And if that is the legacy of our geo research team, then that's already pretty good.
I can 100% vouch for it because every time I come across a new case study from Malte or from Metihan and some other team members of yours, it makes me more excited. It gives you new angle. It's definitely helping us a lot. It's making this whole geo industry or LLM ranking industry more interesting. So thank you so much for putting in so much effort just in the geo research space and making the industry more interesting. Where's the best place for our listeners to follow you?
LinkedIn is usually the place where I publish all my research.
Great. Thank you so much, Malte. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me, and also thanks for the kind words about our research team.
No, thank you so much.